Hey Jay, I'm Missy and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak tonight. Jay asked me months and months ago, and then he reminded me, but it's been on my calendar for quite some time, and I've been looking forward to it. I didn't realize how much the meeting had grown until he just told me before we got started. But first thing I want you to know is I love AA. I wished I could have gotten the 12 steps when I was in high school. I know it would have been much more useful than the algebra that they tried to teach me. But I'm a member of the Spiritual Progress Group here in Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm active in our district and in our area. I've served as GSR, events committee, and I do try to stay right in the middle of the herd. That's where I find the most joy and peace. I can actually say that since October the 31st of 2017, that's my sobriety date. I just celebrated my 7th birthday. I have really been rocketed into the 4th dimension. I have learned a new peace, a new life that I would never have thought possible. As a child, I grew up in a very trauma-filled home. My dad was an alcoholic. My granddaddy was an alcoholic. Every man in my family was an alcoholic. I generally thought all men were alcoholics and that they were mean drunks. And so from that, it was just, beer joints, fighting, and there was never enough money to go around, and lots of hurt feelings. So I grew up being the oldest of 3 children, and it was kind of my job to always put everything back together again. And I learned to put on a mask. I really thought if people knew what it was like at home, that nobody would like me. And so I learned really early how to lie and how to pretend that things weren't really the way they are, or they were at the time as a kid. If you'd have told me that when I grew up I was going to be an alcoholic, I wouldn't have thought that, because I saw as a kid how traumatic and how fearful I was back then, that I just didn't think that I would ever do that. But I do believe that the book's right. I believe that it's somehow ingrained in us, maybe even genetically. I got my mama used to tell me when I was little that I'd lie when the truth would sound better. And, now I can look back and I know a lot of the reasons was just because I was afraid that I would not be accepted. And as I grew up into a teenager and a young adult, all those bad habits that I learned as a kid just came along with me. And then you add alcohol on top of that, and it makes for a very unruly person. And I went to school, and I always tried to do very good because I always wanted approval. I always wanted people to like me, and I always I just craved that recognition, I guess, from folks. And when I got to college is really when my drinking got out of hand. I got my first DUI back in 1986. I was a sophomore at Ole Miss, and it was in March of 1986. I still remember the month because it was 30 years later that I got my second DUI. In the book, it talks about the man that went 25 years without drinking because he wanted a business venture. And so even though he knew that he had a problem drinking, he didn't drink for 25 years. And I had a problem, in my 20s. Like I said, I got my first DUI, and I think I was about 20 years old then. But I really wanted that family that I never had as a kid. So when I met what was to be my husband, he had that family. He had, his daddy led the singing at church. They had, a nice brick home. They didn't fuss and fight. And within 6 months after meeting him, I married him because I could see that he had that family I wanted. And he told me, he said, Missy, if you don't quit drinking, I'm not going to go out with you anymore. And I did. I quit. I didn't pick up another drop for 21 years. I raised my children. I was able to go to law school during that time. And I really had a good life. I tried to be that good model mother and good woman that I thought women were when I was that little kid. And what I know now is that my motives were wrong. I didn't drink, and I was involved in church, and I did all the churchy things. I took pies to people when they were sick, and I made food and took it to the fifth Sunday dinners, and I taught Bible school, and I went and picked up the little children that didn't have a way to church and brought them to church. I did all the things that I thought good people did, but I wasn't doing them for the right reasons. I was doing them really for, to get that pat on the back or for that recognition. And I really didn't know, even though I was in church, I really didn't have a close relationship with God. God was more of, I was either doing it right or I was doing it wrong. And, I wanted, I wanted to be doing it right. But for, like I said, 21 years, I didn't drink. But then when my marriage failed, my husband was not an alcoholic. He didn't drink, but, like many other folks, he had other vices. And those vices were always women, dark-haired, dark-eyed, short women that looked a lot like me, but 20 years younger. And after his third affair, and he had gotten her pregnant, I lost it. I quit being able to pretend like everything was okay, because I had pretended to the church folks that, our marriage was fine. I had gotten through law school during this time. I had pretended to everybody at work our marriage was fine. And then when you couldn't pretend anymore and somebody was going to find out, that's when my world came crashing down. And it was then that I picked up the drink. 21 years later, I picked up the drink. And when they tell you in the book that it's, it gets just as bad quickly, it did for me. I ended up getting my second DUI in March of 2016, which was exactly 30 years to the month from my first DUI. Now, I really think God has a sense of humor, because he was trying to teach me something, and I just couldn't get it. But, during this time, I'd had two children. They were teenagers by this time, and they didn't need mama running them around to soccer practice and to school. They could drive. And, I had lost all sense of identity at this time. I wasn't a mom didn't feel like I could be their mom anymore. This family that I had tried so hard to have, it was gone too. And alcohol made everything easier. And I went probably for, a good 4 years drinking hard. And after I got that DUI, the attorney that I was working for found out about it and said, "You're going to have to go to treatment." So in 2017, I went to treatment, not to get help, and not because I thought I had a problem, but just to keep my job. And when I got there, I was very angry. I was very, I thought I'd never been to an AA meeting before. I didn't know anything about treatment. I really just thought I was going to be there for about 30 days, and then I would go back home and I'd do whatever I wanted to. But when I got there, I found a book about adult children of alcoholics. And I picked that book up and I started reading it. And in that book, I found myself. And I realized that a lot of the trauma that I was going through and not being able to deal with life on life's terms, a lot of it had to do with how I came up. And I just didn't have I didn't have the skills to do it. So at treatment, they took me to my first AA meeting, and I remember sitting in there, and I was looking around the room, and I don't even know what the topic was, but I remember at the end of that meeting when they offered that white chip, and I asked the guy beside me if I could go up there and get a chip. And, of course he said yes. And that chip was the first time that I had held something in my hand in a long time that represented hope to me. And I felt that, if I just stuck around and I would just listen, that, something in my life could be different. And the period after treatment and getting dry, getting physically undrunk was hard. That every time something went wrong, I would drink over it. Every time something went right, I would drink over it. And then when I went to AA and I found out that, it was all about not drinking. Because really, when I went to AA, I thought they were going to teach me how to go into a restaurant and have 2 glasses of wine and go home. I didn't know that it was about abstinence. And the physical part of getting sober was hard, but I had my husband that I have now. He's the one that picked me up, and I really felt sorry for him, because that first couple of weeks out of treatment, I told him I was kind of like a porcupine. I would just bristle up, and I wouldn't want anybody to say anything to me, and I was just going to figure it out, and I was just going to work it out. And part of my treatment was I had to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And so he started taking me to AA meetings in Grapevine, Texas. And in those AA meetings, I really found some words of hope. I found a sponsor. She led me through the steps. And, I don't know how many of you out there are one chip wonders, able to pick up one chip and not go back out. And I don't say that to brag about it, but that's just the way it was for me. Once I saw that that there were people in this program that had something I wanted, I really didn't have a desire to go back out and drink. I have just really wanted to learn more and more and more about the program. The physical part, if you can get to steps 1, 2, and 3 and get physically alleviated from, just get the alcohol out of your system, and get to, steps 4, 5, and 6, man, when I did that 4-step inventory, I poured out my heart on some paper. And I still have it. I still carry it around with me. Today, I have 4 sponsees that I'm working with right now. I usually don't take but 3 at a time, but right now I have 4. But I still have my first step 4 with me, because it was such an important turning point in my life, because nobody had ever walked with me through, what my resentments were, what my character defects were. And, a lot of those character defects were just things that started out good, and just through life and warped sense of reality had morphed into these liabilities that created me into a person that I didn't want to be. The emotional part of it, when you're able to like yourself again. And I remember that. I remember the day that I really thought, that I liked myself again. And it was March See, I got sober in October, so it was about 180 days after I, gotten sober. But it was a March day, and I remember I was walking into a ladies' meeting, and I looked up, and the sky was blue, and the sun was shining, and in Texas in March, some days you get some days that really seem like summer, and summer's on the way, and that's what this day was like. And you know, I looked up in the sky and I thought, I feel different. I feel good. And I had not felt that way in a long, long time. I mean, I couldn't even remember feeling that way a whole lot as a kid, not even on Christmas morning when you wake up and see all the toys under the tree. It was it was a feeling of peace. And that's what I know now. I didn't know it then. Um, but I continued to work the steps, and that was in March. And, Bill says in his book, he says, there's no calamity in your life that's so great that something good can't come out of it. Now, if you would have told me that back then, back in September, so in September of 2018, I was 9 months sober. And my oldest son, he was 25 at the time. He was still out there, and I had told him, I was like, his name was Macon. And I was like, Macon, you should really try AA. I'm really finding some good stuff in there. And he was like, Mama, that may work for you, but it's just not going to work for me. And he wouldn't go. He was still here in Tupelo, but I was in Texas. And it was on Labor Day weekend, and he had his daughter. She was 4 at the time, and he had gotten really drunk that morning. It was on a Sunday morning, and he got caught really drinking with his daughter. And at the end of the day, after the grandmother had come got his little girl, and he was very upset, and he was calling me, and he's like, Mama, I'm going to do it this time, and if I don't, you pull the plug. And he had threatened suicide before, but I didn't think he would do it, and after that, I called his dad, and I was like, do you have Macon's gun? And he said, I do. And so nobody went to check on Macon. And that night, and Macon was an alcoholic. He had it. He would start his day with a bottle water full of vodka. And he reached that jumping off point that they talk about in the book. And he hung himself that night in a tree in his front yard. And that was hard. I mean, that was really hard. It was it was a pain that I hope nobody out there ever has to experience. But you know what? I didn't have to drink over it. And I know now that God can use all things for good. I mean, even though I miss my son every day, I know that someday I'll see him again. And, I just know that God knows more than I know. And I am able to help people, I have a foundation set up called Making a Difference. So we help people in recovery with expungements and access to justice that they wouldn't have through his foundation. So, I do believe that God can use even the bad things in your life, and he can use them for his good if we allow it. What I have found in AA is something that I never found in church. What I find with my friends in recovery is a love that that I've never found anywhere else. You know, when I walk into a meeting or just joining in this meeting, we have a sense of camaraderie. I mean, we know that each other have been drugged through the ringer, and we're ready there to do whatever it takes to get each other back to where we need to be. You know, in the book, The 12 Varieties of Religious Experience, it says to have a spiritual awakening, you have to have a calamity, you have to admit defeat, and you have to appeal to a higher power. And that appeal to a higher power is what I've learned in AA. I have learned that it's not what I want that's important. It's because if I follow what I want, I'll end up drinking again. But every morning, you know, I start my day with a meditation, and I get on my knees with my sponsees. I require every one of them to get on their knees just because it creates that humility that we have to have and that willingness that we have to do what this program requires us to do. And the big thing is just for us to get out of the way, for us to, you know, give up our fiefdom, you know, so that we understand that we're not always in control. To me, living in steps 10 and 11 and 12, that's the good stuff. You know, in step 10, it talks about the acid test of staying sober and keeping an emotional balance and living for a good purpose. And, you know, today things don't always go my way. But I don't get mad about it. And if I try, if something is robbing my peace, I go get my book and I'll read page 417 and I'll look for what my part is in it. And, you know, then I give it to God, because the only thing that I know that I can control is me and my reaction to the world around me. And it's in the self-searching that this program requires that has brought me so much freedom, because in the past, I always tried to be what I thought other people would like or other people wanted me to be. And, you know, that's hard to live up to. First of all, you know, you're just going on a guess, because you really don't know. You can't get into the head of other people and know what they want. And it's a hard measure to live up to. So when I get right sized and I just look at me and I wait on a nudge or a hunch or a gut feeling. I'm sorry about my dog barking, but I find that makes life a whole lot easier, because I'm not trying to live up to someone else's standards. You know, now I know that motives are important, and if I'm doing something for someone for me to get noticed or me to get a pat on the back, then that's the wrong motive, you know. And used to, that is the reason that I did things, but now that's not the reason at all, you know. And now if I don't know what direction that I'm supposed to take, that pause that they taught me in AA, that's exactly what I do. I don't do anything. I just wait until I do get that nudge. And, you know, the beautiful thing about AA is that I get to see the miracles over and over and over again. I get to sit in a newcomers meeting and I get to sit and watch because I was that newcomer one time before. And when I get to sponsor a woman in the program, I get to relive those miracles all over again. And, it teaches me to wait on God's direction for myself and for, how to lead these sponsees, because I sure don't want to make it worse for them. I want to be there to support them, and I want them to get what I've got. I mean, today I was sitting with a sponsee, and she's got less than 30 days, and she's really upset because she didn't have a job. And we were just able to talk it out real, just real simple, and say, but you don't need a job. You're living in a place and you're not paying any rent. You don't have any expenses. And maybe this is where God has you, so you can just focus on you and your recovery right now. And just to see that peace that came over her face just made it all worthwhile. So, the wonderful thing about recovery to me is that it's easy. I had thought that it was going to be really hard. I thought when they said, you can't drink at all, I was really angry about it, that I wasn't going to be able to take my Yeti down to the pool and have a drink, that I wasn't going to be able to go into a wine bar and have a glass of wine. But, that thought doesn't ever even cross my mind anymore. My life is so full of wonderful people. And, our group just had our gratitude dinner last Saturday night, and there was probably 100 people there, and we were surrounded by people in recovery, and we had a great speaker, and we had a great food. And, I can't ever remember going to a bar and having that much fun and having that many people that really loved me and wanted me there. That's what this life is about. And I'm just thankful for it. I'm thankful that that Bill W. and Bob hashed it out so many years ago. And, every time I read those first 164 pages with a sponsee, something else just jumps off the page at me. And it's exciting that I can continue to learn from something that was written so many years ago that's so apropos today. One of the things recently that I've been trying to devote more time to is meditation. I don't know how many of you have tried to meditate, but in step 11, it talks a lot about meditation, and that's your time with your higher power. And the meditation is part of, and we read it every time we go to a meeting. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, to know his will and the power to carry that out. And I, when I first sat down and I tried to just meditate and just sit there, it was hard, because in our society today, everything's instant. Phones, microwaves, even this Zoom call. I mean, our lives are just so full of everything: media, TV, work, activities. We do it to our children, even growing up. We feel like we have to keep their days packed full of things to do. So when I first started trying to meditate, I was going to do it for an hour. Well, you know how that went. it might have lasted 5 minutes. So, but as I have continued to do it, it gets easier, and it gets to where if you don't do it, then you miss that time. You long for that time, because that's kind of a time to reset and recharge and just, allow your higher power to bring you to a new level of what's important in life. And one thing that happened last week when I was meditating, I'm a lawyer. I have a law practice. I have 9 attorneys that work with me in my firm. And I got in my head that maybe these attorneys aren't working as hard as I'm working. So I was like trying to pull up on the computer and see when they signed in and when they signed out to make sure, that they were working as much as I was working. And, God just, when I meditated on that, because it was causing me unrest, God said, it doesn't matter. You don't need to check all that. You're going to know. You're going to know who's working and who's not working, because it's going to show up, and I was like, yeah, you're right, God. I'm just out here like you've seen a duck on the water and their little feet just under it, just paddling away. Well, I was like the duck flipped upside down. I was just, trying to figure everything out. And what my higher power gave me was just this peace and this overwhelming sense of, what you're worrying about really, really doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, I'm going to show you what you need to know anyway. And if I hadn't have taken time to meditate on that, I might have went back in next week and tried to still figure out, put cameras up or figure out, who's working and who's not working. So if you're battling with things in your life that's causing you unrest, try meditating. Just try sitting there. You might only be able to do it 2 minutes or 5 minutes, but then, it'll get to be 10 minutes and 20 minutes. And, your mind, sometimes you have to pull it back in. You might, start thinking about what you got to do tomorrow or what you're going to cook for supper. But if you'll just bring it back in, and just sit there as long as you can, then it's just going to help you. I'm just a firm believer of it. And it talks about it in the book. The book says in step 11, the self-examination, the prayer, and the meditation, that all those are good if you just do them individually. But if you take them all together, this is the quote, it's an unshakable foundation for life. I mean, how many of y'all don't want an unshakable foundation for life? I mean, that just resonates with you, and it just makes you feel so warm and whole. One of the things I have to be careful about, though, because even though I'm in recovery, I still have an alcoholic mind. And, I can think that I can get so close to God that I know what his will is for you and me. And so I have to be careful of that, to make sure that I don't try to make my will his will. So, the last part that I wrote down to talk about was about step 12 and carrying the message and practicing these principles in all my affairs. The best part of AA to me is sponsorship. And, to be able to sponsor people, you know what you got to do? You got to be at meetings, because that's where you meet people to sponsor. And I do think that that's important, because, Bill, when he was on that trip and his deal had gone bad and he went back to the hotel, and he only had 6 months sober, and he looked down the hall and there was a bar full of people, and on the other end of the bar was a telephone. And all he knew was to stay sober, that he needed to work with other alcoholics. And he picked up the phone and he called a church and he said, give me a name of some people that I can talk to. I'm an alcoholic and I need to talk to another alcoholic. And he got 10 names and he started calling those names. And he called 9 of them and didn't have any luck. But the 10th one that he called ended up getting him hooked up with Dr. Bob. And that's how AA began. So, you know, I don't know that any of us are going to go out there and create anything as big as AA. But if we can make the difference, if we can be a part of a better life in just one person's life out there, then it's good. And we'll get peace from that and satisfaction from that. You know, I think that in the program of AA, the biggest thing that I've learned is the peace and the tolerance and the patience and the love that comes from working these steps. And I think that's what it means when it says practicing these principles in all my affairs. You know, that I always, if I'm upset, I look to see what my part is in it, that I'm always out there and available. You know, my sponsor said, if somebody asks you to do something in AA, say yes. And I do. If they ask me to do something, I always try my best to say yes. The book talks about a few simple rules. If you just learn a few simple rules to live by, that your life will be better. And my sponsor had me write in the margin of my book that those simple words were: don't drink, trust God, clean house, and help others. And that helping others and doing it for the right motives, not doing it so somebody else can see you doing it or somebody else can give you a pat on the back for doing it. Doing it because you really love people, because you really want to see those people succeed. That's what makes it all worthwhile. You know, and I believe it's in Dr. Bob's book, he talks about the story about the nomads and the camels. And he says that at night, the camels bow down so that they can take the nomads could take their load off of them so that they could rest. And in the morning, the camels bow back down so they could put the load back on and make it through the day. And that's what I do with page 86 and 87. You know, every morning I just ask for what I need that day to get through the day. And miraculously, it just happens. And at night, I bow down and I thank God for keeping me sober. And I get up the next day with and I get to do it all over again. So Jay, I don't know that I can talk the whole time, but I am thankful that you asked me to come talk to you.
You don't have to talk the whole time. I mean, it's fine. Whenever you're done, you let us know and we'll just stop it.
If nobody has told any of y'all or all of y'all today that they love you, I love you. And I am thankful for you. And I'm thankful that you all signed on today. And I hope that maybe you heard one little something that may help you through the day. And that's all I got.
Yay. Oh my God, let me stop.